Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about very interesting political game that is currently taking place between Slovakia, Hungary, Ukraine, and most likely Germany is also involved in this political game. I would like to remind you that Slovakia and Hungary are the only countries, official countries of the European Union who were buying oil and gas from the Russian Federation during the special military operation. But in 2025, Zelenskyy and Ukraine did everything they can with the purpose to stop this process by destroying the Druzhba pipeline that is located in Bryansk region. After the Druzhba pipeline was destroyed, Russia stopped selling gas and oil to the territory of Slovakia and Hungary. Obviously, this is an act against the energy security of these two small European countries. That is why the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, and the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, were trying to convince Zelenskyy to stop attacks on Russian facilities, and for these purposes they suggested him to have a meeting on the territory of Uzhhorod. And during the previous 24 hours, the meeting on the territory of Uzhhorod took place between Zelenskyy and the Prime Minister of Slovakia, where the Slovak Prime Minister was trying to convince Zelenskyy. But as a result of talks, we have a press conference, and Zelenskyy made it clear that he refused the Slovak Prime Minister Fico's request to stop strikes on Russian energy facilities supplying Slovakia with oil. Ukraine will not supply Slovakia with oil and gas coming from Russia, said Zelenskyy at a press conference after meeting with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico in Uzhhorod. Hungary, in a very short period of time, struck back. And we have very important statement made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Are the Russians against it? Hungary will not support Ukraine's accession to the European Union, not because of Russian position. Zelenskyy had talks with the President of the European Council today, and of course he mentioned us in his statement. In his opinion, Hungary's refusal to allow Ukraine to join the European Union is incomprehensible, because the Russians are not against it either. Well, Zelenskyy is back in his element, and like him, our position is not determined from the outside. We are not interested in what Moscow thinks about Ukraine's membership in the European Union. We are interested in the opinion of the Hungarian people, and they have expressed their opinion. They do not want Ukraine to be a member of the European Union. So this is the statement made by the Hungarian Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs. And there was another important note made by the same person. He stated that Hungary and Slovakia are not the only countries who buy oil and gas from the Russian Federation. He stated that several European Union countries are secretly buying Russian oil. And right after this, we got another statement made by the German Minister of Foreign Affairs. She stated that the sabotage of the Nord Streams is an act of terror. So this is very important statement, because according to this statement, things that happened with the Nord Stream on the territory of the Baltic Sea is an act of terror. And according to information we have, most likely that attack was carried by special forces of Ukraine, which means that Germany sent a message to Zelenskyy that if you don't change your position, then most likely we will be forced to rush the investigation process about attacks on the Nord Streams. But what is the connection between Germany, Slovakia, and Hungary? Basically, when talking about the Nord Stream, this pipeline was attacked in the international waters on the territory of the Baltic Sea. When talking about the Druzhba pipeline, this pipeline was attacked on the territory of the Russian Federation. We see that there are completely different situations with area, but the thing is that both attacks against the Nord Stream and against the Druzhba pipeline was attack against the European Union energy security, and which means that both attacks can be recognized, despite the fact that one of these attacks took place on the territory of the Russian Federation. Both attacks can be recognized by the European Union, by Slovakia, by Hungary, by Germany as an act of terrorism, which means that this can lead to unpredictable consequences for Zelenskyy and his team. But as of now, we see that Zelenskyy doesn't afraid of this, so let's wait and see how the situation is going to be developed, but obviously something important might happen. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we got lots of very interesting updates. And first, let's talk about the Zaporizhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, Ukrainian resources published this video where in this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in the southern part of the settlement of Plavny or in the western part of the settlement of Stepnogorsk. We can see Russian soldiers that were moving from one building to another under very heavy fire of Ukrainian drones. Based on this video, we adjusted the map in this part, so we colored additional black and the complete Russian control. So we see that very slowly but step by step, the Russians continue their offensive operation with the purpose to improve their position around the city of Stepnogorsk and then to finish the battle for this area. As for the eastern Zaporizhia direction, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes were also recorded. The Russians continue their offensive operation, and as you can see, every single day we are adjusting the map in Russian favor. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of September. This is the moment when the Russians launched another round of their offensive operation. By the end of the 4th of September, we colored the settlement of Novosilovskaya. By the end of the 5th of September, we colored territories around the village of Kamyshevacha, and by the beginning of the 6th of September, according to pro-Russian resources, the village of Kharosha was completely secured and captured by the armed force of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, the pro-Russian resources are saying that currently the Russian army continued their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement Sosnovka, and currently there are very heavy clashes for the village, which most likely will be abandoned by Ukrainians in coming maybe days or even hours. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, a few more videos were recorded from the territory of Udachne. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were flying above the settlement and how Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking Russian soldiers on the territory of the village in the southwestern part and in the northwestern parts as well. Here we can see how several Russian soldiers were trying to probably create a stronghold or something like the shelter on the territory of the building in the northwestern part, but Ukrainians attacked this building with the purpose to destroy it completely. So this episode took place exactly in this building, which means that this area is also under complete and strong control of the armed force of the Russian Federation. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. We see that the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory, and most likely in coming days the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. As for the Pokrovsk agglomeration and the eastern flank of the Mirnograd city, during the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian resources reported that the territory and fields between Mykolaiivka, Mirolyubovka and Mirnograd were taken by the Russians completely. So according to pro-Russian resources, these territories were taken by the Russians by the beginning of the 6th of September of 2025. As you can see, without any proofs that can confirm this. At the same time, we see that the Russians continue their assault operation on the city of Mirnograd. Lots of explosions were recorded during the previous 24 hours. The Russians continue using bombs, aviation, artillery strikes. Furthermore, the Russians continue offensive operation in the direction of Shakhovo Pocket. Here we can see another episode of how Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armed force of Ukraine in the territory of this village. But the most important thing that no changes were recorded has been recorded probably since the beginning of September of 2025 in this area. Either the Russians and the Ukrainians are not able to take initiative in their hands, either the Russians or the Ukrainians are regrouping. The Konstantinovka direction, the Russians continue their offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours we got additional report that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly around the village of Maiskaya. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported about complete control over the settlement of Markova. In March of 2025, the Russians reported that the village of Novomarkova was taken. According to the map of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, all these territories were marked by these let's say defensive office as a territory under complete Russian control, and today several pro-Russian resources from the ground confirmed that the village of Maisk is about to be taken. We expect that in coming hours the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation may confirm this information. So this is very important because we discussed that from this foothold the Russians are able to attack not just the city of Konstantinovka from the north, but the Russians may develop their offensive operation further in the northwestern direction towards the city of Kramatorsk. And here we can see very important updates that we got during the previous 12 hours. But before this, let's discuss the situation in the Siversk direction. During the previous 24 hours and during the previous night, additional changes on the ground were recorded. The pro-Russian resources reported that the village of Perezhny was taken by the Russians completely. The battle for this village lasts for just 3 days, and the Russians finished this village. And now the Russians entered the village of Zvanovka, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this area. This information was confirmed both by neutral mappers and by pro-Russian resources. So very important offensive. If Russians continue, they will be able to maintain the lines and to shorten the distances like this, and to begin offensive operation towards the villages of Pokrovsk and Zvanovka. And if Russians are able to take these two villages under complete control, this means that the southern defense of the city of Siversk will collapse automatically. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the Serebryanka forest. They continue moving further in the direction of the Seversky Donetsk river with the purpose to cross the river in the end and to begin offensive operations towards the city of Siversk from the north. At the same time, very interesting updates we received along from the area along the highway MO3. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukraine resources published lots of very interesting articles regarding the situation on this highway. The Russian armed forces are conducting FPV drone strikes on the Sloviansk highway. The last few days have seen lots of activity by the Russian armed forces drone crews on the Sloviansk highway, where about 10 pieces of equipment have been hit since yesterday evening. In particular, transport was hit in the area of Krapivka settlement, where the Russians even burned a civilian bus. That was stated by Ukrainian sources. So here we can see Ukrainian vehicles that were moving along this highway, and here we can see damaged and destroyed vehicles, either of the armed forces of Ukraine or even of civilians. So the Russians established complete control over this territory, and this means that the logistic of the armed forces of Ukraine is about to collapse. We remember that currently the Russians are also advancing in the direction of the city by the name of Lyman. And for example, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded between the villages of Dirilova, Drobyshevo and Stavki. So very important through lines and strongholds were taken, and we see that the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the city of Lyman to the minimal level. So it seems that the Russians may begin offensive operation in the direction of the city of Sloviansk much faster than the battle for the Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk ends. Very interesting situation. We believe that indeed the Russians are tasked to finish the battle for the Donbas region by the end of the 2025. Furthermore, during the previous 12 hours, we received more photos of Russian equipment, possibly from the 155th and 40th Marine Brigades in Donetsk Oblast. So the Russians are getting more and more units in this direction. It seems that they're preparing themselves before final and very, very major battle that we can just imagine during the special military operation. And of course, at the same time, the Russians are not reducing their pressure on the territory of the city of Kupiansk. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking Russians in the northwestern part of the city of Kupiansk, and several episodes were geolocated. One of Ukrainian strikes took place exactly in this point. Based on this video, we adjusted the map, we adjusted this part of the city in Russian favor. Furthermore, today, neutral mappers restored control over the contested area along the railways that used to be under complete Russian control, but then were recolored as a contested area according to different mappers. Now we recoloring this territory back in Russian favor. So the Russians intensifies their offensive operation in this area as well, with the purpose to establish complete control over the city of Kupiansk. I would like to remind you that Ukrainians were forced to redeploy a huge amount of forces in the Konstantinovka, Pokrovsk, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk directions with the purpose to stabilize the situation, and now Ukrainians suffers huge shortage of manpower on many directions, and the Russians decided to use this advantageous situation in their favor. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.